Namaste and welcome to our continuing series, The Life Divine with Ranganath. And today we will be doing a missing part of our series. It is part 131 and the chapter is Supermind, Mind and the Overmind Maya, page number 288, starting from the paragraph, but when we look more closely.
So, when we want to redo a para, we have to get the reference of what he has said earlier. Otherwise, it is not very clear. So, what I propose to do now is to tell you roughly. I'll read out the summaries of the two previous paras and then we'll see what he's saying. It's a big para. It's about 2 pages. So, we'll do that first. We'll get the summary of what he's saying, so we know exactly what he's going to talk about. Then we go into each sentence to see the language and the subtlety of the ideas. Okay, so I'm going to read out the summaries of the earlier paras so that we get the sense of continuity. Srimna said in the earlier ones, we have seen, this is my language, this is not Srimna's language. We have seen the principle of the connection between the superconscient and the inconscient or the subconscient. But these two are at opposite poles in the scale of existence. The one becomes the many, the infinite tapers off into the finites of the universe, the formless puts on forms, the permanent becomes the transient, the timeless and spaceless becomes transient and dimensional space. This is the basic idea that we are starting with. We may examine one aspect of this polarity to see the relation of the mind of knowledge to the mind of ignorance. The former is a truth consciousness. The mind of knowledge is a truth consciousness, and the latter is a limited mind of man in ignorance. These two are so far apart from each other that it seems the connection between the two without intermediary gradations. It looks as though there are no gradations between the two. The mortal mind of man is in ignorance. It seeks for truth. The supramental, the higher element, is an eternal possession of the truth. Its formations are realities. The thoughts of the mortal mind are artificial constructions, temporary images in the brain. Of course, this mind is much hampered by the downward pull of the grossness of matter and the impurities of the vital. There must be some transitional gradation between the two opposite poles. Which are they? To repeat, the superconscient and the inconscient. There must be gradations of consciousness in different planes, you say. In the involutionary downward descent, there have to be intermediate steps by logical necessity. In the evolutionary ascent, the intervening steps are a practical necessity. The first one refers to the divine descending into the world, and the second one by yoga, you are raising your consciousness and going up from where you came. In the evolution already achieved, we see these 3 gradations. The matter, life and mind. Intermediate energy creates organized matter. Matter is organized. The number of electrons determines the nature of the element. It is organized. The inconscient is not organized. Okay? Inanimate matter produces subconscient life and forms plants. The subconscient life produces sense-based life forms, insects, lower animals. He is giving you the gradations. Okay? The animal life develops into mentalized life. Intelligent life seeks even to go beyond itself. So, the sequential steps clearly establish the need for transitional steps between the mind of knowledge and the mind of ignorance. What he's saying is that since what has already happened what is already, the evolution has come up to 3 stages, matter, life, mind. We see that there is a gradation. So there must be a gradation also on top. Okay. So this is what he says in one para. Then in the next para, which we will read now, and then we'll go to what the missing text is. If these intervening steps do exist, they are superconscient to man because he is limited to the present mental level. Even if they exist, they don't seem to be available to us. The higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, these things we don't see easily. What is below him seems to be unconscious, free of all consciousness. When we look at matter, there doesn't seem to be any consciousness there. He cannot gauge the different degrees of the subconscious. Animals, plants, unicellular organisms, matter. These are the grades in the subconscious. Man knows nothing of what is above him, nor does he know what is below him. There. This is very similar to the phenomenon of sound and light. Below a certain decibel level, nor above a certain decibel level, can man hear anything. Similarly, he cannot see the infrared nor the ultraviolet. His senses are limited to a certain range. So consciousness also is subject to the same law. It can only see a certain range of consciousness. Above it can't, below it can't. That's what he's saying. Similarly, he cannot see the infrared nor the ultraviolet. Likewise, man knows very little of the total cosmic consciousness. A very small range of the total consciousness is available to him. He neither knows the animal nor the gods above him. Okay? It looks then as if he has no links to the totality of consciousness. Nature seems to have limited him to his mental consciousness only. It seems that man cannot rise above his own level. Now Srimdo says, but is it really that, or is it only an appearance? This is what he said in the 2 para before this. Now we come to what we have to do. This is a missing portion. It was episode 131 or something.
Yes.
And today we are just filling in that one. So again what I do, I'll tell you what he is saying in the para. Then it will be easy to follow his language. Okay? Because it's a big 2.5 pages para. So if you get the basic idea of what he's saying, we'll follow his arguments. Okay? He's saying, is it really that these higher planes of consciousness are close to man? Now he says, when we look closely, we find that this first view is deceptive. There are 4 things that deny this view that man cannot rise to the higher levels of consciousness. The first is intuition. It's a capacity in man, however rare, to access supramental knowledge. Supramental knowledge above the mind. Not supramental in some sense, but supramental above the mind. Okay? The second link is the impersonality of the self. He can experience the cosmic consciousness when he meets the impersonal. The third is the phenomenon of genius. The genius is one who has availed himself in knowledge above the mind. The last and fourth link is spiritual experience that opens the gate of the superconscious to him. This is the gist of what he is going to say in the para that we are going to read now. But we go into each sentence and we see how he develops the theme. Now, I read each sentence and if necessary we'll discuss it. But when we look more closely, we perceive that this normality is deceptive and that in fact there are several directions in which the human mind reaches beyond itself, tends towards self-exceeding. These are precisely the necessary lines of contact or veiled or half-veiled passages which connect it with higher grades of consciousness of the self-manifesting spirit. First, we have noted the place of intuition. Intuition occupies in the human means of knowledge. And intuition is in its very nature a projection of the characteristic action of these higher grades into the mind of ignorance. So, I don't remember whether he's going to define, but intuition is knowledge that comes into the mind without the process of thought nor logic. It just comes like a drop of light. Okay. Interesting examples are there. We know very well that our famous mathematician Ramanujam, he used to get intuition and he used to attribute it to his goddess Saraswati. He used to say that she is the one who is sending me these, and there is no logic involved at all in what he used to do. In fact, his mentor, Hardy, the mathematician, he recognized his genius, but he always asked him to prove his theorems. But he couldn't do it because there is no logic to it. Intuition is not logic. It is above the mind, and he is to receive those, and he is to receive them infallibly. A good example of intuition. I think he wrote about, one mathematician friend of mine told me, about 3,000 equations he wrote. And all of them are being proved today. I think some are still not being proved. But logically they can be proved now. So that was intuition. Simply straight descent into the mind. First we have noted the place of intuition. Intuition occupies in the human means of knowledge, and intuition is in its very nature a projection of the characteristic action of these higher grades into the mind of ignorance. The mind of ignorance is when you see multiplicity, you see the many and think that they are real, and you don't see the oneness of things. That's the mind of ignorance. It is true that in human mind, its action is largely hidden by the interventions of our normal intelligence. This is a very interesting statement that he is making. Your normal intelligence is actually hindering the intuition that is always there available to you. Okay. So I'll give you an interesting example of how this is possible. In the daytime, are the stars there in the sky or not? In the daytime, they are there. But you don't see them. Why you don't see them? Because the light is hiding it. When the darkness comes, you see. Okay? So the light is actually hiding the things that already exist. So your mental consciousness is giving you knowledge. It is light in the mind. But it is not allowing you to see the intuition coming in. It's a very interesting thing. That's what Swami is saying. But with the image, it becomes very clear. Okay? So, in other words, when the mental becomes silent, then the intuition can manifest and you see that. It is coming all the time, but you don't see it. Okay? So, have noted, and intuition is in its very nature a projection of the characteristic action of these higher grades of the mind of ignorance. It is true that in human mind, its action is largely hidden by the interventions of our normal intelligence. A pure intuition is a rare occurrence in our mental activity. For what we call by the name is usually a point of direct knowledge which is immediately caught and coated over with the mental stuff, so that it serves only as an invisible or a very tiny nucleus of a crystallization which is in its mass intellectual or otherwise mental in character. It's like if you have a dirty glass, okay, with mud in it. Now you pour pure water into it. Will you see the pure water now in the glass? The dirt covers it over. So exactly the same way he's saying, when the intuition comes, it is pure, but the mental stuff coats it. So, and remember, mental stuff is really a substance. Okay, it's a stuff. It gets coated.
Also, like when intuition is coming, does the factor of like the receptivity of the mind and the material consciousness play a role?
Of course. Because unless you are receptive to it, The intuition is coming every day. Just like Madras, the radio station is broadcasting frequency modulated. Broadcast is going on, coming. Are you receiving it? No. You have to tune into it. And tuning in is what is called the receptivity.
And also, like, the individual tuning may not align with the collective tuning. That's also possible.
Here we are talking only of the individual.
We are not talking of the collective.
Okay. So this is what. It is true that the human mind in its action is largely hidden by the interventions of our normal intelligence. A pure intuition is a rare occurrence in our mental activity. Yet we can say, I'll give the examples later. For what we call by the name of intuition is usually a point of direct knowledge which is immediately caught and quoted over with mental stuff, so that it serves only as an invisible or a very tiny nucleus of a crystallization which is in its mass intellectual or otherwise mental in character. Or else the flash of intuition is quickly replaced or intercepted before it has a chance of manifesting itself. So, very interesting. He's giving you actually the mechanism of how it comes. The intuition comes in, but the mind is dominant in the normal mind, and it quickly gets this and replaces it with another word. This is a phenomenon that occurs when you are reading a text. Okay, I'll tell you, it's a very interesting phenomenon and very similar to this. When we are reading in class, okay, the children are reading, not uncommon at all. They are reading and understanding, and they replace the textual word with their own word. They substitute it with a synonym. So they have understood correctly, but they are substituting it. Look what Sridhar is saying. He's saying when the intuition comes in, you replace it with your own mental thought. It's highly interesting. Okay. Each thing that Sridhar says is so interesting that you have to see what he's saying here. Okay. So he's saying it can be replaced. That's one. Okay. Is quickly replaced or intercepted. That means it is not fully replaced, but there's a mental thing that comes and influences that intuition. Okay.
And also, like, when intuition is coming, it can get mixed by our like mental and vital.
That's exactly what he's saying by intercepting.
Right.
There is a mixture of your thought and the intuition. Okay. Before it has a chance of manifesting itself, by a rapid imitative mental movement, okay, insight or quick perception or some swift leaping process of thought which owes its appearance to the stimulus of the coming intuition but obstructs its entry and covers it with a substituted mental suggestion, true or erroneous, but in either case, not the authentic intuitive movement. So it has gone into great detail. It can be replaced, or it can be intercepted, or it can be very quickly changed. So he is giving all these. In any case, when it comes into the mind, it gets coated over with mental substance and is not the authentic intuitive movement. Nevertheless, the fact of this intervention from above, the fact that behind all our original thinking and authentic perception of things, there is a veiled, a half-veiled, or a swift, unveiled intuitive element, is enough to establish a connection between mind and what is above it. But he has told you it is rare, but it can come down pure also. It opens a passage of communication and of entry into the superior spirit ranges. There is also the reaching out of mind to exceed the personal ego limitation, to see things in a certain impersonality and universality. There is the second thing. So the first thing he says, intuition is very clearly one element which allows man to contact the higher planes of consciousness. Now he talks about the second way you can rise to the higher levels of consciousness. Impersonality is the first character of cosmic self. When you make your mind silent, and not everybody can do that, but if you succeed somehow to do that, Your consciousness rises into the levels of the spiritual planes of consciousness, and you can experience, not necessarily, but you can experience a universal cosmic consciousness. In the cosmic consciousness, you lose your personality. Your personality is your identification with body, life, and mind. You feel yourself to be vast and infinite, this impersonal. And we give a good example of impersonality by the grain of salt. The grain of salt is very, very personal. It's got features. It's got color, shape, weight, size, form. And you throw that into water, the form, color, size, shape disappears. But the saltiness is now everywhere. So this is the impersonality. The true person in you can be impersonal at the cosmic level. Impersonality is the first character of cosmic self. Universality, non-limitation by the single or limiting point of view, is the character of cosmic perception and knowledge. Universality, non-limitation by the single or limiting point of view is a character of cosmic perception and knowledge. This tendency is therefore a widening, however rudimentary, of these restricted mind areas towards cosmicity, towards a quality which is the very character of the higher mental planes, towards a superconscient cosmic mind, which we have suggested must, in the nature of things, be original mind action, of which ours is only a derivative and inferior process. Sri Aurobindo calls mind, in the level of ignorance, there is the physical mind, the vital mind, and the pure mind, which is the logical mind of man. But he calls the higher levels of consciousness also mental consciousness. There is a higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, and overmind. This is the second level. So this is what he is saying, is a very character of the higher mental planes towards a cosmic mind, which we have suggested must, in the nature of things, be the original mind action, of which ours is only a derivative and inferior process. We have what the animal does not have, a logical capability. And the logical capability is possible when the mind is not influenced by the vital and the body. Then it becomes capable of pure thinking, and he calls it the pure mind. But a pure mind, however pure it be, it is limited, and it's only a degraded form of the spiritual mind. That's what he's saying. Okay, so the very character towards the superconscious mind, which we have suggested, must, in the nature of things, be the original mind action, of which ours is only a derivative and inferior process. Again, now he is coming to the third. Again, there is not an entire absence of penetration from above into our mental limits. Again, there is not an entire absence of penetration from above into our mental limits. Other possibilities are there, and that's he is speaking of genius now. There is a third element which allows you to rise to the higher levels of consciousness. The phenomena of genius are really the result of such a penetration. Veiled, no doubt, because the light of the superior consciousness not only acts within narrow limits, usually in a specific field, without any regulated, separate organization of its characteristic energies. Often indeed, quite fitfully, erratically, with a supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible governance. But in entering the mind, it subdues and adapts itself to mind substance, so that it's only a modified or diminished dynamis that reaches us, not all the original divine luminosity of what might be called the overhead consciousness beyond us. Now, this is a very interesting thing what he's saying. I'll read that phrase again and we'll look at what he's saying. Often, indeed, quite fitfully, erratically, with a supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible governance. What he means is a phenomena well known in yogic circles. It is what is called the phenomenon of balavat, okay, pishachavat, jadavat, unmattavat. The higher consciousness descends into the mind, but it is not characteristically its own. There is a certain impurity here which does not. So the person who has a higher consciousness, he can behave like a little child. We have had cases in the ashram, very interesting cases. We have had the case of Balavat. We have had the case Pishachavat, no. But Jadavat, there is a... I'll give you an interesting example which is there in the internet. Okay? And Unmattavat also we have had in the ashram. We have had these two cases, Balavat and Unmattavat. I have seen them both very clearly. But Pishachavat, like a ghoul, you go on walking, that also there has been to a certain extent. Okay, there used to be a lady who had, she was in a higher consciousness, we can say, because she is constantly looking at mother's picture, constantly. Now, a normal person in normal consciousness won't do that. Okay, but she was not normal. She wouldn't. She would go always roam about in the streets, and she came from a very good family. So this is what can happen when the higher consciousness comes down. Okay, that's what he is describing.
No, that is not a distortion, I mean.
Yes, it's a distortion, but yet the consciousness is at a higher level. Okay, I'll give you one example which is there in the internet.
You don't know the mechanism. How does it happen?
Pardon?
How and why does it happen to a particular person?
How can we recognize?
How does it happen to a particular person? Why?
No, I didn't follow the question.
How and why does it happen to a particular person?
Oh, because there is no clarity in the lower part. There is an impurity still.
Oh, I see.
So he has told you just now how it comes. The higher consciousness comes and gets mixed up with the impurities below. There is no clarity. So there is a little bit of confusion. So this Balavat, I'll give you an interesting example.
Balvat, Unmat and Pishachvat.
Pishachavat we have not had. We have not seen in the ashram.
No,
Okay.
You said that one lady you were concerned.
Pardon?
You talked of one lady.
Yeah. You can't say Pishachavat, but Unmattavat perhaps a little.
What does Unmattavat mean?
Unmattavat means Unmatta. That means not fully conscious and a little madness comes in. Madness. Okay.
No, in this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
Not normal.
in last 12 years, we were told that it is,
Tell me what she's saying.
she was in Unmat Avastha.
He's saying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is said, was in Unmattavat Avastha for the last 12 years. Chaitanya, he's saying for the last 12 years of his life, it is said that he was in an Unmatta state.
I don't know what that would mean exactly. Maybe they are using the word in a different sense. But Unmattavat means not normal, mad. A little madness is there. So this is what can happen. And he is listing all this under genius. Okay. So
They are all part of genius.
part of
All four are part of genius element.
all, no. The four are all, he is pointing out things by which a normal man can have access to the higher levels of consciousness. That's why I read out the first two paras previously. He says that we can't understand what is the animal, we don't understand how the plant is working, so it's a darkness below and there is also a darkness above. But is that really so? There is a connection. And this connection, however rare it is, these four things are the connections. This is what he is saying. So the first is, what was the first? Intuition. Second, impersonality. Third is genius. And the fourth he will tell you is the spiritual consciousness. In the spiritual consciousness, these things don't happen. You are fully awake and very, very normal.
Regarding these four words which you are using, so on page 243 of the Light Divine, in the CWSA edition, So by footnotes, what he has written in English, so by footnotes they have given the corresponding four Sanskrit terms. Jadavat, Balavat, Unmaktavat and Pishachavat.
Yes,
So
I know that.
why I am saying this is because for this, can we make the direct mapping like this? I am not so sure because it was done earlier.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you why I'm sure. Look at the words carefully. Because there also he uses the same words. Okay? I'll tell you, see. He's saying, often indeed quite fitfully, number one. Erratically, number two. Supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible. The word irresponsible is repeated there in the other passage. So there is very clearly he is referring to that.
But there is no fourth. Like if there are four, then there should be four here, no? Balavat, Unmaktavat.
No, here he is not talking about Balavat. I am telling you. I am telling you. The four that he is speaking about is the first is intuition, the second is impersonality, the third is genius, under which he is saying this. Okay? When the genius is something which descends into you, you can receive it purely or you may not receive purely. If you don't receive, this is what happens. Irresponsible, abnormal and irresponsible. Very clearly he is referring to this phenomena.
Irresponsible, fretful.
Pardon?
Fitful.
Fretful.
Fitful,
So it is
erratic. Your behavior is not normal, erratic, supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible.
It is not a constant conscious.
Yeah. See, I'll give you one example of, in Tamil Nadu, this gentleman died in 1980s, in the 80s he died, 85 or so. He was this exactly Jadavat. He would just sit and do nothing at all. But many people recognize that he has got a capacity and he lives at a higher level of consciousness. So they would come and feed him and bathe him even. He will accept whatever you give him, but he will not do anything by himself. He will neither take a bath nor eat. You give him food, he will eat. You give him even a bidi and he will smoke. Irresponsible. And if you put a mala on him, he will accept quietly. But by himself, he will do nothing at all. It's a very interesting case. That is the irresponsible. They're saying he uses the word irresponsible. Doesn't do anything at all. Jadavat. But how do we know that he is at a higher level of consciousness? Because he used to make forecasts. People used to come and tell them, and he used to tell them what to do and what not to do. Often in symbolic terms. His name is Pundu Swami. Pundu Swami. Okay? You can check on the internet. It's a very interesting case.
Pundu Swami.
Pundi. Pundi Swami. P-O-O-N-D-I. Okay? There's a whole video on him. Okay. So, still, the phenomena of inspiration, of revelatory vision, or of intuitive perception and intuitive discernment surpassing our less illumined and less powerful normal mind action are there, and their origin is unmistakable. Finally, there is a vast and multitudinous field of mystic and spiritual experience, and here the gates already lie wide open to the possibility of extending our consciousness beyond its present limits, unless indeed by an obscurantism that refuses to enquire or an attachment to our boundaries of mental normality, we shut them or turn them away from the vistas they open before us. But in our present investigation, we cannot afford to neglect the possibilities which these domains of mankind's endeavor bring near to us, or the added knowledge of oneself and of the veiled reality which is their gift to human mind, the greater light which arms them with the right to act upon us and is the innate power of their existence. So these are the four things that
The first three items are, can we say, non-spiritual?
The four are, first is intuition,
Intuition,
impersonality, genius, and
they are
spiritual.
also spiritual? No.
No, they are not spiritual because you are in the lower consciousness. Only a contact has been made.
But then when you are living in the intuitive plane of consciousness, then doesn't it become spiritual?
Then yes.
Yes. But only when you're getting glimpses, then it's
Yeah.
not, because you are not fully awakened to the intuitive
That's
plane.
right.
Right.
Impersonality, yes. It's a spiritual consciousness because you rise to the cosmic consciousness level. That is spiritual. But not necessarily genius. You are open to, in fact, there is a very interesting movie, okay? He was a genius, no doubt, because he was receiving, but erratically, and he was not psychologically normal. The film name is A Beautiful Mind.
Yes.
It's a story of a Nobel Prize winner, but he was psychologically unstable. But he was a brilliant, he was receiving things, but erratically.
But can the mental disequilibrium be a consequence of the force and the energy
Yes,
he is
also,
receiving?
if the Aadhaar is not ready, that can happen.
So when we were talking about genius and the four consequences of it, so it can be because the Aadhaar is not ready to receive the force of genius.
That is
or
common to
everything,
yeah.
even the intuitive plane.
Intuitive plane, definitely. You are not rising to the intuitive plane.
Right.
The intuition is descending into you.
Right.
When you rise to the intuitive plane, it's a very high level of consciousness.
Yeah. And also, like, there is a movie on Ramanujan. There's a movie called
Yeah.
Ramanujan, and in that movie, they sort of explain that since he was receiving so much of power and inspiration in his equations, it did have a bodily impact. Like in the movie, they show that he suffered some sort of an attack, but it can be a medical thing, or it's very difficult to say.
No, there are two reasons for that.
Okay.
He lived a very short life. He died in the 1930s.
Right.
That's because he was a Pakka South Indian Brahmin vegetarian. And he comes from the south of India. He was there in Kumbakonam. I think as far as I remember, he was in Kumbakonam. But when he goes to England, temperature minus below zero, and food not available in those days, 1930s. Today everything is available. Vegetarian food is available in Europe. But at that time there wasn't. So he had a lot of problem. That was the reason.
Right. Right.
How do we view manifestation of Jada Bharat? Jada Bharat. How do can we classify or we can treat him?
Jadavat means
Jada Bharat. Jada Bharat.
He is referring to the story from Bhagavad Puran of a person who was named Jada Bharat.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't think that he will fall in category 3 or Jada Bharat.
I don't remember the.
He is Jada. That's why he is called Jada Bharat.
I think he does fall in that
spiritual.
category. Otherwise, why should they call that?
Jada. And also these gradations, Chiyamno, one letter he says, these are for the Paramahansas. And he says Paramahansa is a grade of realization. There are ones higher than that, there are ones lower than that. And he clearly says that this kind of vital having a Balavat behavior for a Paramahansa, he says there is nothing supramental about it. So in his view of the transformation of nature, this is not sufficient. It is the old tradition, it's the old spirituality which glorifies all this.
Yeah.
His aim is not to make us any of these four Paramahansas, no. His aim is to completely transform the vital so that it is full of force and yet it is stable, there is no disturbance.